I do have to say this is probably my second most favorite location so far. I love Park City in Utah and just being out here. In fact, pretty much every time we got in the car, all I said to my husband as I was looking around everywhere is just, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. I'd love to move here. So thank you again for having me. Today I'm going to talk about one of my very favorite topics, which is using analytics for optimization. And this pairs a lot of my background and history as a practitioner. I spent a lot of my early years actually being a practitioner of analytics and optimization, doing the analysis, running the experiments. Then I started to build teams doing all of that, and then I started to evangelize about all of that. It's been a really interesting career. And as mentioned, I spent a lot of the last several years at Google actually getting to go around the world and talk about this subject and many more, and really teaching people how best to do this. Now I'm fortunate enough to be at a company called Quantcast in the Bay Area, where I'm actually kind of doing it all over again. I am building a product marketing and a growth team, and really kind of helping them to accelerate their vision online. So very, very excited about that. And as mentioned, I'm a huge advocate for women in analytics and just promoting women in tech in general. And so I blog about that, I tweet about that. There's a lot of great resources out there on Measure Slack, on Twitter, to promote and celebrate women doing really cool things in tech. All right, so there are many factors that contribute to low conversion rates on our websites. You know, the first might be something like user experience. Is your site slow loading? Does it not speak to the user with the appropriate types of messaging? Or, you know, does it just frustrate them when they get there? I actually got a story about how one site frustrated me so much that I actually had to dig into their analytics to see what else they were doing wrong. I'll get to that a little later. The second is site content and personalization. Are you actually speaking to the right audience? Does the content that you have on your site target them and actually help them to move them through your buying process? Next, and really core to my experience, is actionable web analytics. Do you have the right data in place so that you can make the right realizations and actually optimize your site going forward? And fourth, kind of related to both 2 and 3, is development resources. Do you have enough development resources to be able to actually action on the right analytics and the right optimization strategies for your organization? Now, I think this one in particular has gotten a lot better over the years. There's now a lot of A/B testing tools and various things out there that really help you to do this much faster with WYSIWYG editors and you know, the ability to do a lot of it on the fly. Back in my early days of doing some of this, I actually had to fight for development resources every quarter and might get enough resources to launch 1 or 2 tests if I was lucky. So this is a really big one, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it since that one's getting a lot better today. So the majority of this talk, we're actually going to talk about number 2 and number 3. All right, so we all know, we've all heard by this point that site content, optimization, personalization, very, very important, right? 94% of marketers agree that this is really important. Of those actually doing it, they're seeing a 19% uplift in sales. So it's very, very beneficial if you can do it right. Even the Harvard Business Review, they said not to know your customers, not to understand their unmet needs, and not to invest resources based on those needs is to cede one of your most important assets to potential challengers. So digging in, I've actually created a framework for what I want to walk you through today. And I've called this the optimization framework, and it's 4 pieces. So we're going to start with analysis. You know, making sure that we understand what's going on, we have all the right data, we can package that data up into meaningful tidbits that we can then action on through the rest of this process. And I'm going to spend a good amount of time talking through some tips here. I've got 5 tips to really dig into your analytics to make sure that you're capturing and understanding all of the right information about your customers. Next, we have hypothesis. This is where you take a lot of that information and you make some assumptions. You come up with some ideas, and then you go ahead, and number 3, you test them out. You run some A/B tests, some multivariate tests. You really put those hypotheses into testing so that you can see what might be going right, what might be going wrong, and how you can actually change and optimize your site based on that. And then finally, once we've really mastered those first 3, that's when we move into personalization. And I've actually got a whole lot more that I'm going to dig into in the second half of this talk on personalization to really get to the root of how to do it and how to do it well with as few resources as you possibly can. Okay, let's start with analysis. So as I mentioned, I've got 5 tips here for you. The first is making sure that you're using campaign tagging to distinguish your variations. Does everybody know what I mean when I say campaign tagging? UTM tagging? You guys familiar with that? Yeah? If you're not, there are little URL parameters you add to the ends of your URLs online so that you can actually understand where people came from. Very, very important to be able to attribute all of those new leads or new customers to the appropriate sources. So we want to use them to distinguish different variations when we're actually testing out various things in market. So the first is email testing. Now, email testing is a great way to try out different creative and reach different audiences. And you may have different offers in these different emails. Maybe you have an offer for $10 off or 15% off. And you want to make sure that you're tagging those offers appropriately so that when people follow the email and come to your site, you're actually aware of which offer they came from so that you can then go back and analyze and see which of those was best performing for you. Next is ad testing. Now, these days with AdWords and DoubleClick and all of the other ad platforms out there, most of them offer what's called auto-tagging. And auto-tagging is very important. I highly recommend it. It makes sure that you're getting all of that relevant information in there. But they also generally offer the ability to override or add to that tagging. And I like to actually use the UTM content field, which is kind of like a bonus field of UTM tagging, to actually denote the variation of the ad that I'm testing. And I actually like to do this with the headline of that ad. So let's say I had 3 different ads that I'm testing the headlines for. I actually place the headline into the UTM content slot. That way, when I'm actually analyzing in Google Analytics or in my analytics platform, that headline is right there. I don't have to go back and kind of look it up and see what variation C was to figure out what ad might have worked better. It's human readable right in your analytics data. And next is social media. And this one's really important. I can't stress this one enough. How many of you guys put UTM parameters or some kind of tagging parameters on your social media posts? Why do I see so few hands? You should all be doing this. But the really important piece here is that you're actually distinguishing them. Now, that means that every time you're posting on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram with the same actual ad, you need to use a different URL, a different shortened URL with different URL parameters to denote that they came from Twitter or from Facebook or from Instagram or from anywhere else that you're sending traffic from. This is super important so that you can then understand which of those channels is driving the most business for you. So I have an example here. This is from my personal blog. And I tend to blog a lot about analytics and optimization, go figure. And I post in a bunch of different channels. And when I post, I always create individual short URLs for each of those posts to denote which social channel that they came from. And in this case, you can see that I had some coming from Twitter, and this is a little bit old because it has Google Plus on here. And sadly, Google Plus is going away, or not so sadly, I don't know. Nobody really uses it anymore. But as you can see, in the ad content slot, so that UTM content slot, I'm using that final field to actually put in the headline or the post title that I'm posting. So not only do I know that somebody's coming from Twitter, or from Google Plus, or from Facebook, I know which article they're going to. And now I can start to do some really interesting analysis. So based on this set of data here, I actually looked at the numbers, looked at the different channels, and what I realized was that when I blogged about Google Tag Manager, I actually got much more traffic coming from Google+, because up until its dying days, Google+ had a very active Google Tag Manager community on it. So when I blogged about that and shared it in there, I actually got quite a bit of traffic coming from there. But when I blogged about pretty much everything else, or anything else, most of my traffic came from Twitter. Now that's an analysis that I wouldn't have been able to do had I not gone to this level of detail in my tagging. This then led me to post more on Google Tag Manager and Google+, and more elsewhere for other topics. So our next tip is implementation to track conversion. And we're going to do that with the data layer. Does everybody know what the data layer is, or tag management systems in general? Google Tag Manager specifically for this example? Yeah? Okay, if you don't, tag management helps you to implement tags on your website. Google Tag Manager is a flavor of that, and the data layer is an extra piece of code you can put on your site to be able to collect more information about site visitors. So this is where I was mentioning earlier that bad UX really frustrates me. So A couple weeks ago, I was in New York visiting the Quantcast office in New York for the first time. And a couple of days a week, they actually provide lunch through a service called Seamless. Anybody know what this is? It's like a group ordering tool, so I can go in, I can see all the different restaurants. Now I get to the site, and I'm pretty overwhelmed. There are 328 different restaurants that I can choose from. And I'm not from New York, and none of these sound familiar, so what am I supposed to do here? Well, there is a refinement tool, okay, good. I'm gonna go ahead and refine this by burgers. All right, so now we're down to 16 options, still a lot of options. Not all of them have pictures. When I actually clicked into some of these, none of the menus have pictures. I couldn't tell what was what. I actually had to go to Yelp to try to compare. I spent far too much time trying to order my lunch. Terrible user experience. So I started to think, well, if this user experience is so bad on the front end, I wonder what type of data they are collecting or not collecting. So I put on my analyst hat. I used the GA Chrome extension debugger, and I pulled up their analytics data. And I'm gonna blow this up here. Now you can see they're tracking a few things. They've got an analytics account on there, that's good. They're tracking page views. But one thing that stands out to me immediately, and this is a huge, can't stress this enough, huge no-no. They are using UTM tags on internal links. So when I came to their site and I logged in as a corporate client, I got redirected to the corporate client ordering page. And in that redirect, in that submit button, they added UTM parameters there. Now, who knows what that's going to do to my data? What? Override, exactly. They have no idea now how I actually got to their site in the first place, because they've overridden that data with their own internal UTMs. This is why you never use UTMs on your own site, because you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of where everybody's coming from in the first place. Second, it also resets the session count, so that's a big error for them, because now they have me as 2 session counts. Third, you can see it's 3 session counts, because in that redirect, they didn't implement it properly, and that's also resetting the session count. So these guys have a lot of not so great things going on with their analytics. One thing that I don't see here, though, is anything for event tagging or custom dimensions. Now, this again is a huge miss, because they're missing out on collecting information that they're going to want to know to optimize my site experience, right? I refined my search by burgers. That should be something that they collect and know, so that next time I come back, maybe they can target me with some burger-specific content, right? Well, since I didn't see that there, I took a look at their URL, and the URL stayed the same, so they're not changing the URL either, so they're not getting anything on a page tracking basis, they're not getting anything on an event tracking basis, they're not getting anything on a custom dimension basis. They know nothing about me or my actions on this site. Huge mess. So I took it upon myself to develop a hypothetical data layer for them that they could implement without having to do a lot of other things here. And I added in a few things. I said, let's make the city New York, the district Midtown, so we can get really specific, and the page subcategory, or that filter option, as burgers. And now you can actually send these data layer elements to Google Analytics as custom dimensions. And voila, you have a whole lot more rich information about your customer in analytics to be able to create audiences and retarget or optimize their experience on. All right, tip number 3, understanding site engagement. Now we're going to stay with Google Tag Manager for this one. There are a couple of really cool triggers in Google Tag Manager that I really love. Now the first is the scroll tracking trigger. Now, who has ever implemented scroll tracking on a website without this? No one? One person? Well, lucky you if you haven't, because it was super painful before. Like, yes, you're nodding, because you would go to someone's blog post, maybe Justin Catroni wrote a lengthy blog post about how to do it, took a lot of custom code, very painful process. So Google Tag Manager released the scroll tracking trigger, and I actually set this up on my personal blog in about 5 minutes, and that was actually twice as long as it would have taken, but I kept stopping to take pictures so I could write a blog post about it. As you can see, I implemented it, and I implemented it with just a 25, 50, 75%, 100% tracking, went and tested it, scrolled through my page, all those events fired in real-time analytics, and I was sure it worked. Really quick win. And the next one is the element visibility trigger. Now this is somewhat similar, but even more advanced. So on my blog, I have a newsletter subscribe box. You can come to my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter, you get alerted when I've posted a new blog post. Now I wanted to know how many people actually had the opportunity to see this newsletter sign up blog or post widget, but didn't actually sign up. And so I created a visibility trigger to let me know when that newsletter subscribe box was in the foreground of the screen, visible in the screen space, for more than 2 seconds. If it was visible for more than 2 seconds, I created an event and had that event sent to Google Analytics. And you can see right there in real-time analytics when I tested it, it's the first one. I named it element visibility. And then what I did with this was I actually then created a custom metric to look at the times that the newsletter subscribe box was visible over my total visitors, and voila, I had a subscription rate. Pretty cool. All right, moving on. Understanding form engagement. Now, I mentioned event tracking earlier. I love event tracking. I think you can get so much more information out of your site by using event tracking, and it's sadly really underutilized by a lot of clients. So, quick refresher for anybody who's not familiar with event tracking. It's a hierarchy in Google Analytics. It's 3 levels. It starts with the category, then it goes action, and then it goes label. Now, the thing about event tracking that is so wonderful is that you can actually use any of these 3 things in any way that you want. And the thing that is so terrible about event tracking in Google Analytics is that you can use any of these 3 things in any way that you want. Meaning that there's no real structure here. You have to create your own structure. You have to be very careful and document that structure so that you actually know what these things mean. I like to use this structure, where I use the category to denote the location of the event, the action for the actual event, and the label for more information about that event. All right, here's a real example. A few years back, I implemented the Google Analytics marketing website with event tracking. And here you go. You can see the location of the event here, where they were on the Google Analytics marketing website. If we click into one of these, number 8, the contact form, we'll get to the next level of the event hierarchy. That's the action. In this case, I used the action to tell me which product somebody was interested in when they clicked on Contact Us. And number 4 was that they were just interested in all of the products. If we click into one of these, Analytics 360 Suite, we're going to get to the last level, the event label. And in this case, I used the event label, and I used all of this as an on-change event to know when somebody had clicked in and started typing into a particular form field. So every time somebody clicked in, not just tabbed in, but actually started typing, I fired off an event with all of this information. Now, in Google Analytics, the table is normally sorted by the first metric column after the primary dimension column. I've actually resorted this by unique events. You can tell because it has the downward arrow in the top right corner. And when I did this, I see something very interesting. This is actually pretty much the order of my form, right? They started with first name, they went to last name, they went to job level, email. People were pretty much filling this form out in order. And they weren't really dropping off between each of these form fields, right? They persisted pretty well through the form. That was great. There's one outlier, region. It was an optional form field. But there's one other thing as an analyst that really stands out to me here. Who can tell me what that is? Come on, shout it out. What was that? I heard something. Form length. Not quite.
Why are the numbers different than required?
Yeah, so you're on the right track. So the numbers are different between total events and unique events, but specifically for line 8 and 9, they're significantly different. I think that's probably what you're going to say. So the submit line is what really caught my attention. The total events are so much higher for submit than the unique events, meaning that people were clicking this button over and over again and coming to some kind of error they weren't able to submit, right? So I actually put on my little UX hat, and I went to the website, and I started filling out the form myself to see what might have been going wrong. And what I noticed was that it didn't actually indicate very strongly when a form field was required. You know how they have those little asterisks next to a field? They were super small and kind of light gray. You couldn't really tell. So my hypothesis was that, well, people probably just didn't realize that this field was required. They filled some of the things out, hit submit, got an error, filled a couple more out, hit submit, got an error, finally filled the whole thing out and was able to actually submit. So I took this feedback to my product and UX teams. I said, hey, we should probably fix this. We put in a quick fix, and voila, the numbers came much more in line. So a very easy fix based on some analysis I was able to do because I was tracking form field interactions with on-change events. Okay, my last tip is that your site can tell you what's important. Now, two things here. First is site search. Anybody using site search? Yes? Great. If you have a search box on your website, you can actually track the keywords that people are typing into there. It's a very simple setup in Google Analytics. It's literally a checkbox, and you add in what your query parameter is to tell them when to start collecting the keyword. And you start to get information like this. Again, this is my personal blog. I have a search box on there. People were searching overwhelmingly for Tag Manager or Google Tag Manager or other formations of that. And what that told me was that, hey, I guess Google Tag Manager content's pretty popular in my blog, or people coming here are looking for that. Maybe I should go ahead and write some more content on Google Tag Manager. So you can get a lot of information about this. It's essentially users telling you exactly what they want on your site, but maybe they can't find. So you can use this information to optimize your site from the type of content to the location of content to the searchability of that content. Now, the last thing here is heat maps. This is a tool called Crazy Egg. I don't know if you guys have ever used this. It's one of my favorite heat mapping tools. And what I like so much about it is actually this report. It's called the Confetti Report. And what it does is every time there's been a click on the page, not just on a clickable element, but anywhere, it actually puts a little colored dot, and it color codes them. But what's so cool is that you can actually change what that color-coded dot means. I really like doing the time to click. You can start to see how long it takes people to click on various pieces of content. You can start to segment people based on that. If people are immediately clicking, maybe they're not really engaging or understanding, or that maybe they're just so familiar they know exactly what they want. If they're taking a really long time to click on something, maybe they're having a hard time finding that information. So you can get a lot of really cool insights from this. Okay, now taking all of this, let's run through a sample analysis. So Google has a website called the Google Merchandise Store. Now, this is a store that you can actually go ahead and purchase Google branded gear, if you ever want a Google hoodie or something like that. But more importantly, it's actually the demo account for Google Analytics. So this is actually a Google Analytics account that anybody can go ahead and get access to and check out this data to be able to play in a real live e-commerce analytics account. Now, let's pretend that you run the digital marketing for the Google Merchandise Store. And you want to know what the performance of your paid campaigns are. Specifically, two terms come to mind. Google Merchandise and Google Merchandise Store are standing out. Now, you dig into this a little bit more. You segment by mobile, and you see something kind of funny. You see that on mobile, Google Merchandise actually has twice the conversion rate of Google Merchandise Store. And you're wondering why that might be, right? They're pretty similar terms. They had a lot of the same amount of searches. Well, let's go ahead and dig into this. And this is where we move into a hypothesis. Now we got to kind of come up with some ideas about why this might be. So if we put our hypothesis hat on as the analyst, right? There's a few things that might happen here. So, maybe if somebody is searching for Google Merchandise Store, they're actually searching for a physical store location. They want to walk in and buy something and walk out with that merchandise in hand. Now, I happen to know that there are only 2 Google Merchandise Store locations in the entire world. One is at Google's North America headquarters in Mountain View, and the other is at their European headquarters in Dublin. So if you're outside of either of those 2 places, searching for Google Merchandise Store might be sorely disappointing because you can't find an actual location to walk into. So one thing that we can maybe do with this is, if we're going to go with this assumption, we could say, well, how can we test this? How can we test this hypothesis out? How can we actually make Google Merchandise Store more appealing to people on mobile devices so that they don't leave? Maybe we could do things like highlight on our website the online-only content, or that we offer fast shipping, or other ways to kind of appease that need to walk into store and get something immediately. And how do we know if this will work? Well, that's where we move into the next stage of the optimization framework, and that's to test it out. And to do this, we're going to walk through a framework something like this, right? We're going to create our different experiences. We're going to then select our analytics goals that we want to use to measure how successful this test is going to be. And in this case, that's going to be purchases. Then we're going to go ahead and target the right audience. In this case, it's going to be mobile users coming from those keywords. And then we're going to go ahead and run this test. We're going to analyze our results and then report on what those winning variants are. And hopefully, we see that our hypothesis paid off, and we see a nice uptick in conversion rate for Google Merchandise Store. All right, now that we've mastered all of this, we move into personalization. And I spent a lot of time doing a lot of various types of personalization, and I think this is such a meaty topic that I have actually broken this out into a few more areas. Some of the things that we're talking about here are kind of what personalized experiences should I provide to my customers, and what's the expected benefit? So to dive into this, I actually created a separate maturity framework called the Personalization Maturity Framework. This is going to start with mass scale, really understanding who the majority of your users are and speaking to those users. Next, we have specialization. Is there a specific locale or location-specific content that you actually want to target? Then we have referral source, really targeting people where they're coming from, using those UTM parameters or various other aspects to really make sure that we're targeting them based on what we already know about them, in this case, the referral source. And finally, actions. They may have come to our site before, they've done a lot of different things on our site. We can use that information to then target an even more personalized experience. Now, the reason I've actually broken this out this way is because over the years, I've heard a lot of different talk about how best to do personalization. You have to purchase a really expensive tool and really expensive consultants to be able to personalize. And honestly, I just don't really buy that. I don't think that's true at all. I think you can do that, and I think there's maybe a lot more niche things that you can get by doing so. But I actually think that everybody can start to personalize based on the data and the tools that you already have. And so all of these tips are actually going to be based on that assumption. So we're going to start with mass scale. Now I'm going to bring you back to my analyst days at Google. When I first started at Google, I was running the analytics and optimization program for what was then called the Google Apps for Business group, which is now called the G Suite group. This is essentially where you can come to buy Google Apps for your own business, right? If you want Gmail, Docs, Drive at your own domain. And this was their marketing website. Actually, this is a little later on in my tenure there, so we'd done a few optimizations, but there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit here. Don't get me wrong. Now, we were focusing in on this case with the Discover a Better Way of Working headline. Our marketing team loved this headline. They thought it was a holistic message about how you could use the whole suite of tools that we offered to help you really discover a better way of working. Now, as part of our testing process, we took ideas from everywhere. We got ideas from sales and from engineering and from product, and we really wanted to make sure that we had a lot of input in terms of our A/B testing roadmap. Now, our engineering team came to us, and they said, this headline is a load of crap. We know that 75% of people that sign up for Google Apps for Business only ever use Gmail. So we should be targeting our headline to them. We said, okay, we can try it out. And at that point, I was sitting in the marketing department, and I kind of was buying into what engineering was saying, but also I had some marketing stakeholders who, again, really loved this headline, so it was a fine balance. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and test this. We're going to run a headline test. We're going to test out Discover a Better Way of Working against 4 headlines that engineering came up with. Now, let me stress this again. Engineering came up with these. Get email and more with access from any phone or tablet. Get email for your domain. Get Gmail for work, 99% uptime and 24/7 support. As you can see, these are not the most marketing-friendly headlines. Marketing hated them, but they also thought there was 0 chance that any of these headlines would beat theirs. So we decided to let this test run. Now, there are a few learnings from this test, but which one of these headlines do you think actually won? What? We have a winner. Get email for your domain. Not only did it win, it blew it out of the water. It was performing something like 25% better, which translated into a lot of new leads for the business. Now, I actually happened to be speaking at a conference halfway across the world when this test finished. And I was getting ready to go to bed. And I started getting frantic pings from my director of marketing saying, don't you dare launch that headline. And then I started getting frantic pings from our VP of engineering saying, if you don't launch that headline, you know that A/B testing tool we built for you, we're going to pull all of our support. It was a fine line, as I mentioned. So again, a few learnings here. One, I spent the next several hours of my night creating a follow-up test plan to very quickly try to get back to a marketing-friendly headline, while also appeasing engineering by going ahead and launching this horrendous headline. A few weeks later, after a bunch of follow-up tests, we actually ended up with get Gmail for your business and a little subtext of and Docs Drive and all the other things to help you discover a better way of working. So everybody kind of got what they wanted there. But moral of that story, make sure everybody's bought in to what you're going to test before you test it, so that if something does win, it's not unexpected when you go ahead and launch that. But also that targeting the biggest percentage of your customer base can have real benefits for you, right? You can personalize on mass scale with no type of personalization at all, except for changing your messaging to meet those users. Okay, next we have specialization. We're going to stick with the same line of business. And in this case, this is the US, English US website, right? This was our Japanese website. English, Japanese. Exact same website, right? It's just translated. It's not even localized, it's translated. Now, who here has seen a Japanese website? Do they look like this? No. Japanese websites are busy. There are widgets everywhere. There's so much text and so many different things going on. To me, maybe a little overwhelming, but to the Japanese market, it's what they expect. That's how websites are built and operate there. So we got overwhelming feedback from our sales team that this website was not working for them. They really wanted something different. Also, in the upper right-hand corner next to the bright green button, which said Get Started, was a white button that said Contact Sales. Now, nobody in Japan is going to click on a button that says Contact Sales and submit a lead form to actually contact sales. Just not how they do business. This button literally got 0 clicks. And so my team said, hey, why don't we try to use this space for something else? Why don't we test out something that's a little bit more Japanese-esque and business style, right? Now, one of the things that is really common in business in Japan is handouts. You come to a meeting and you have a lot of papers that you take away. And these papers tell you kind of all of the process for what you need to do to go through the sales process, the sales cycle. So my team said, hey, let's replace that button with something that roughly translates to flow of available, but really was guided flow. And put up this pop-up box that actually is a printout in a PDF form that walks you through all of the process for what you need to do to become a customer. And that actually tested really well. We saw a 700% increase in clicks, so it wasn't 0 clicks on the button before, but very minimal. But more importantly, we actually saw 8% increase in starting trial, which was the main KPI for this business. So huge, huge success. Now we took this and we built on it. So we said, okay, let's mock up a little bit more of a Japanese-looking website. And let's test out a bunch of elements of this. So we added a lot of widgets. We tested out even kind of like a Tokyo-style landscape in the imagery. And a year later, after a bunch more testing, we launched the website you see on the right. And it was the very first time that this business unit had ever had a local website that broke out of the global template. And it performed really, really well. So huge benefit for actually specializing to the local content or to the local users. Again, no actual specific tool needed, just speaking to your local audience. All right, next we have the referral source. And this is targeting your audience based on their referral source. So you probably have spent part of your career creating a lot of ads. Very well-crafted ads, very perfect content that you've written. So much intent goes into that content, into that headline, right? And when a user actually clicks on that, that's a huge endorsement that they are interested in that content. It's user intent as they're coming to your website. But so often, we see all of these really well-crafted ads landing on a very generic website that's not speaking the same language. So how do we find the right landing pages? How do we actually test this out? So here's a hypothetical situation. We're a shoe company, and we are targeting a summer sale campaign to 18 to 24-year-olds, right? So we spent a lot of time crafting that perfect ad. We've got the perfect headline. It captures them. They're interested in the sale we've got. And now they're coming to our landing page. But again, we want to know that it's the right landing page, so we're going to test a couple of variants. So the first one is, this kind of simple variant where we're saying, start your vacation. We've got some shoes and sunglasses, some young people having fun in the sun, an offer for 15% off. And we're going to test this against something much different. It's a millennial audience. Maybe they speak emoji. I don't know. Maybe they don't. But we'll find out when we test this. The point here is that you're actually marrying the intent of the ad and the content that you've created to the landing page where your users are coming to. Because if they already have that intent, bringing them in and creating that same message and intent on the website is going to help them get through that buy process much faster. Okay, the last one we have here is actions. Personalizing based on actions that people have taken on your website. So here we have an example website. This is Light in the Box. It's kind of like an Amazon. I've searched on here for digital cameras. Now I've done some research. I'm trying to find the right digital camera to buy. But after I did a bunch of research, I decided it wasn't quite ready. So I left the website. Now if I put on my analyst hat and I go and look in Google Analytics, this is what's called a custom funnel report in Google Analytics 360. And I actually created this whole funnel, right? People who come to my website, people who search for digital cameras, people who have been added to cart, and then who checked out. And I can see that a lot of people did the first couple and very, very few checked out. Now the thing I love about this report so much is that if you click any one of those red downward-facing arrows, you'll actually get a pop-up box. In this case, it says, hey, 2,346 people added to their cart, but they did not check out. Would you like to create a segment and remarket to these users? Well, yes, of course I want to create a segment and remarket to these users because I'm a good marketer. I want to bring them back to my site and convince them to purchase. So I go ahead and I do that, right? Based on this specific audience, based on the actions that they've taken on my site. But as we've kind of been talking about, there's a lot more that you can do once you get somebody interested, right? We're going to serve them an ad. And maybe that ad's going to have an offer for free shipping on their next order, something to entice them back. But we want to bring that same message to the site when they come back. And so using the same audience that we're targeting or retargeting with ads, we're going to target a new user experience when they land back on our site. Maybe we'll land them on the digital camera page and in something nicer than my 30-second mock-up, have a message saying, welcome back, get free shipping on your next purchase, bringing that intent all the way through to their landing page. All right, we have talked about a lot. We went through the personalization maturity framework just now, starting in mass scale, specialization, referral source, and then action. And this all folds into the bigger picture of the optimization maturity framework. So that is all I have for you today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you. So we got a few minutes before we head to lunch for some Q&A. I was put on blast earlier for giving out the prizes at random. So this time we're actually going to try to give the best question. I just feel bad hurting people's feelings because I think all questions are good. But I was told I was a trophy dad, or a trophy parent, like everyone gets a trophy. Anyway, so we'll open it up to Q&A for Krista. Again, please wait for a microphone to come by. So please just raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get out to you. While we wait, I do have one question. How long ago was it that you left Google? Just a couple months?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah, early February.
So we all hear Google's one of the biggest companies in the world, lots of cool things. What's the number one thing you miss about Google?
Ooh, things just kind of work, right? It's a big company, they've got big scale. And probably the thing I miss the most is now I'm using Outlook at work, and I really miss how that, Gmail integrates with all my Google Docs.
That's a good answer. I thought it was going to be the big slide that we see in the pictures. You slide down from one building to another or something.
I never actually took that slide in my
slide.
6.5 years of working there.
Cool. Okay, we got a question over here.
Yeah, so we naturally like to do a lot of testing on our landing pages for AdWords. I mean, clearly that's where you're going to be spending money and where you can generate money, so you want to spend time there. But as we get more focused, we specialize on niche terms that then in turn result in less traffic, which, as you know, on the testing side, then you've got less traffic for being able to see results. What are your thoughts just in terms of how you kind of balance that need for quick results versus low traffic?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Traffic threshold is obviously something very important to A/B testing. To give you a quick example, when I was running the testing for that site that we looked at a few times, the apps for business site, in the US, we could test on 5% or less of our traffic per variation. In something like Brazil or Spain or something like that, we would have to test on 25, 30, 50% of our traffic per variation. So it's very important. And then you have to kind of make the business decision about what's more important to you, right? And sometimes that means you have to run a test much longer to be able to actually get results. And in that case, the trade-off is how quickly you could run more tests if you were targeting a larger audience. So it's kind of, a personal decision to the business. There are tools, a lot of the A/B testing tools have integrations with various ad platforms. For example, I helped build Google Optimize, and they have an AdWords integration. And you can actually target down to the exact keyword. So anybody coming from that keyword can get a very specific landing page based on that keyword or that set of keywords. So you can also look at tooling to help you kind of decide and weigh out what might be possible.
Okay, we have next question over here as well.
When you're just starting off a campaign, it's difficult to get the right amount of data to make decisions on, let's say, ad copy or landing pages. So, and what we're finding is a lot of times one ad may get a lot of traffic, but the other ad may get more of the conversions. Mm-hmm. So how do you, in a very quick way, so you're not wasting a lot of money, decide, which audiences to turn off and turn on, so that you're optimizing for conversions? And yeah,
great point, or great question. And I think what I always come back to there is what is my main objective of this experiment? Is it clicks? Is it getting people to my website, page views? That's a little bit kind of surface. If it's conversions, then you're probably going to want to optimize towards conversions. And again, back to the tooling question, a lot of tools will allow you to select multiple objectives, right? So you can actually measure how well that test is doing based on either your higher level objective of just getting people to site or the lower level objective of getting them to convert. And then you can start to see kind of what those results look like early on and turn on and off different variations or objectives.
Okay, we have a question right over here, Krista, for you.
Yeah, I was wondering on the Gmail headline test. Did you end up testing the new headline that you ended up going with against the engineering-ish one? And if it was worse, how much worse was the team willing to accept? For the sake of political rest.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely tested it against, you have to have a true baseline, right? So we had to see, compared to the Discover Better Way of Working, the Get Email for your domain, the much nicer Get Gmail for your business. And what we thankfully found was that they were actually pretty flat next to each other. So in that case, it was a pretty easy decision based on just user experience. We decided this sounded better for our users, and because quantitatively it was flat, we felt okay making that call. If it's not flat, though, then that is a trade-off, right? Like, you have to decide how much am I leaving on the table by going with something that, maybe marketing likes better. I tend to be on the side of kind of, the data speaks for itself, which in that case, I'd probably just use the uglier headline and continue to test till we got something better. But it's always, a conversation in the business.
Great. Any last questions? Okay, let's give it up for Krista one more time.